Left Wing podcast. We are in the thick of the Lions Test series. Brisbane's win for the Lions is still fresh in the mind. 27 points to 19. Andy Farrell's men got off to a winning start, and now MCG and Melbourne comes into focus. 90,000 expected there this Saturday. Plenty to talk about on today's episode. Luke Fitzgerald is joining me. Jonathan Bradley is joining me. The Lions have actually just played their last warm-up game. 24-19 winners over the First Nations Pacifica selection. Lots to talk about, guys. But Luke, we might go back to Saturday first and just get kind of a check-in on what we thought of that performance, of how everything went. Lions getting the win on the board for 45, 50 minutes. They were so dominant, particularly up front. I think the whole pack were really pulverising the Australians. Got a bit scrappy towards the end. Hard to know if that was because the job was done and the Lions kind of eased up a bit, or if maybe there's still some question marks over how well they're actually playing. What kind of jumped out to you overall about how the Lions went about their business on Saturday?
I thought, there was a big difference between how both teams defended in the kind of interior parts. I thought the Lions were excellent there. Line speed was brilliant. It didn't really allow the Aussies get too much momentum in there, whereas I thought the Aussies didn't contain the Lions as well. And I thought Finn Russell kind of had the run of things for the first 45, 50 minutes. I really thought they kind of I thought that was the most dominant part of the game from the Pack's perspective. I thought they got lots of turnovers in there. They forced them back. And that was really, really impressive. I also thought they kicked brilliantly. I thought Gibson Park kicked really, really well. I was very impressed with some of his kicking. And I thought Finn Russell kicked pretty good as well. James Lowe. But, I mean, look, Russell had a couple that I think maybe he could have done better in terms of crossfield kicks. There was one or two opportunities that I thought maybe on another day he might have taken. Now, some of the personnel, probably difficult for him maybe to know that. The one with McCarthy probably stands out. That was pretty clear cut, I think. He probably should have done better there. But yeah, I thought the kicking, I thought the defense was very good. And I thought they were more accurate. There was only a few dodgy offloads tried kind of here and there. I thought they kind of they held on and they rucked a little bit better as well. So they were the kind of key parts of the game for me. When I thought what they kind of did there was it pressurized the Aussies and it allowed them to, I think use their kind of power game and use all the kind of quality that they have. And I think that difference in quality showed because they executed on the real basics of the game. And I just think the Aussies were like, I don't think it's a great Aussie team. I really don't. So I think it's funny when you execute those things well. I think, you can make a team look very, very ordinary. And I think that's probably what happened particularly for the first 45 minutes of the game. Interestingly, I did think there was a couple of opportunities for the Aussies in that period where they kind of came back into it. I mean, there was a very unlucky bounce of a ball out of the pitch. And then there was a couple of ones where, disallowed tries and things like that. So I don't know if they'll think that they're completely out of this. And I think they, I still expect it to be a big fight next week. But the Lions certainly have the difference in quality. I thought front row around the pitch, particularly the starting front row around the pitch, outstanding as well. Really big difference between both teams there. Tadhg Beirne was awesome. Some of the passing, Genge's carrying, and then obviously Chien just, that's just run of the mill for him. But it's a funny. I always say that about Leinster. I think Genge just brings that to a new level with the dynamism he has as well. I mean, look, you're not losing anything with Porter. Porter's still outstanding, but Genge does add a little bit to those two guys. And Furlong, I mean, the passing, the decision making, and the skills under pressure for a big man.
Yeah, well,
I think you really see what you miss, don't you? He was so good.
The build up to that first try, you saw both of them. Genge with that really powerful carry near the line, and also the ball kind of shot out of James Lowe's hands, and Genge did really well to pick it up low off his bootlace and power forward towards the line. And then Furlong kind of gets that unexpected pass. I'd say 9 out of 10 tight heads are just tucking their head and kind of, chucking it up, setting it again. But he just swivels, throws the ball out the back, and then it ends up with Russell putting Tui Plotto away under the post.
I thought the back row selections, which were maybe a little bit controversial, possibly both played brilliantly as well. I don't know what Jonathan thinks about that, but I mean, Curry for me was probably the best player on the pitch. Alongside, I thought Furlong had some brilliant turnovers at the start of the game, kind of settled the Lions into the game, I thought, really well, and he was brilliant and a nuisance all game. So those two I thought were, I think, probably the most controversial of any of the calls that Andy Farrell made, and I thought they both kind of delivered for him, didn't they?
Yeah, well, 100% last week when we were chatting with Rudd, I was very much questioning Farrell's selection of Curry and Beirne. 100% vindicated. I agree with you there. I think they were the two best players on the pitch. They were absolutely amazing. Jonathan, anything you want to add? Like, obviously, there was a lot of good Lions performers in particular in that first 50, but God, I was really disappointed with Australia. All the talk of, like, you know, Schmidt coaching them up and kind of muddying the waters and scrapping around and making life difficult for the Lions. They made such an air-strewn start, which is such a thing you don't associate with Joe Schmidt teams when they're really good, when they're really clued in. Like, you know, Harry Potter fumbled that ball into touch in the 22. Like, Fraser McWright got a great turnover, and then from the line out, threw a really crappy pass in midfield that was just, you know, bouncing along the ground. The Lions picked it up. A couple of other kind of errors. There was a free kick at a scrum that led to, I think, the first Lions try. There was just lots of kind of those little mistakes that made life actually easy for the Lions, and they did really grab it in that first kind of 40 minutes or so, but God, Australia really didn't turn up either.
No, and I think that was probably the main takeaway, if you're looking at it from the game perspective rather than a Lions perspective, was just how much Australia didn't look like a Joe Schmidt team. You mentioned the errors, but they looked like what they are. They looked inexperienced. They looked like a team that hadn't played enough games together. If you're thinking about the one advantage that the host nation should have over the British and Irish Lions, is they should be more of a cohesive unit, because they should be more of a team. They will have played more together. But this Australia team doesn't look like that because they haven't played enough games together. You know, we talked about it basically from November onwards, that they had a promising November, and then we didn't see them again until they played Fiji. So they looked shy of game time. And the other thing they looked massively shy of, I thought, was power in the carry. They looked like they missed Will Skelton so much. They'll be better, you would presume, this week with the two lads supposedly coming back in, but they missed those two options as ball carriers an unbelievable amount, and it just made their game plan look so muddied, because they have the athletes in the back line, they have decent players in the back line, but without the power and the carry in that initial sort of phase of the attack, the Lions were just able to phase out, and they dealt with them, I thought, so easily in defense, because there was just that one core element that Australia were missing, and I think it really showed that those two players are probably irreplaceable in that Australia team.
Yeah, 10-0, there was a really long defensive set, or maybe not really long, a long enough defensive set around the Lions 22, and they looked so comfortable. There was just, it didn't look like any inkling that they were going to be broken. Luke, you know, it's interesting, Jonathan mentions those power athletes who are meant to be coming back into the reckoning this weekend, Skelton, Rob Valentini. Like, I really would question Joe Schmidt's team selection. Like, if the guys are fit to play this weekend, I would have risked them in Test 1. Like, for me, Test 1 was the best time to get at the Lions. They're already 1-0 down now. The series is over if they lose on Saturday. So, like, I think Schmidt had a comment about, oh, maybe if it goes to a third test, we want to make sure we have guys available. But for me, like, the first test was their third test almost. I really feel like the series for Australia, like, you had no Skelton, no Valentini. They had Angus Bell on the bench, who's a really powerful ball carrier as well. Billy Potter, the hooker, who's a more powerful ball carrier. It was like Schmidt was keeping his powder dry with some of the selections. And I just felt like that was a really big mistake. We saw how the game started. They just looked nowhere near the Lions level. And with a couple of those guys, now maybe he might say, look, they couldn't have played. But if they're fit to start this weekend, and we'll see the team sheet later in the week, I just really would have I thought it was worth rolling the dice. I don't know what you think. Maybe I'm just being completely unreasonable.
No, I think maybe I kind of agree with him. Like, I think it kind of maybe ties into, it gets tricky, isn't it? Like, we talk about what Jonathan just talked about, and say them, you know, and you were talking about it as well, about them being undercooked. And part of me kind of says, yeah, well, I think the Lions, like, it's been a long season for them. You know, they kind of, it's a long tour. You know, if you can nip one in the second test, you think Australia will be feeling really, really good about that last week. And I think they'll get better and better because they just haven't played together. So part of me feels maybe that there's a little bit of that going on, Will. But, like, at the same time, like, there's no way I don't think Schmidt will be throwing away a test match and giving himself, you know, only an opportunity of being perfect for two tests against what is probably a way better squad than what he has available to him. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's how we would have been thinking. I'd say they weren't able to play. I'd say he's probably risking them this weekend is probably what's really happening behind the scenes, to be honest with you. I don't think he'd throw away a first test. I think he was always going to go full bore. But, yeah, and I think in terms of those bench selections that you mentioned, I think, how do you start a game? Like lots of people go bomb squad route, don't they? And they kind of keep that power on the bench, and they kind of want to go, well, look, we'll get through this first period of the game. It might be messy because, the Test team, they haven't played together a massive amount. This Lions team aren't unbelievably comfortable with each other, like yet, probably getting there, after kind of 4 or 5 weeks on tour. But maybe he was thinking he could kind of contain them, and he'd want to bring on some power when the Lions are bringing on some of their power. So yeah, it's hard to know, Will.
Yeah.
Like I think, well, like he's a good strategist. I've always found he was really clear and about how he wanted to play, and he was always pretty good in terms of his bench selections as well. So yeah, like my sense is that knowing him, that he wouldn't risk them if he felt like it would really ruin. Like he still has to take in the totality of the series and try and keep guys, get guys playing as many games as possible. If he felt like it was too risky to go on the first test, and it was kind of leaning more towards 55-45, he's going to come out of this game. I think he was better off waiting to get it to 70-30, for example, for test 2, and you're hoping he's kind of hitting his strides in the last couple of tests in terms of the 2 guys that didn't make even the 23. So that would be probably how, just knowing him a little, maybe I think that's how he would have been thinking, is that he's probably going the balance of probabilities in terms of, I want them available for more this series than not. And then the bench selection is probably more, that's probably more, what's your taste? Like, do you want to finish the game strong, or do you want to come out fire with fire?
We've had this debate with, say, some Leinster team selection, say, like when they had Josh van der Flier on the bench in a Champions Cup final, and it's like, well, it's not really a bomb squad if you're weakening your starting team and like putting, say, an Angus Bell, who's a really robust ball carrier, and they try to keep him in reserve. But if you don't have a guy of equal standing in the starting team, then I just think you're weakening your overall hand. That's always been like, Springboks can do it because they have very like for like guys, and you're replacing one unbelievable powerful guy with another unbelievable powerful guy. But I just don't think Australia have that luxury. So I would have liked to have seen his strongest team insofar as possible. We will see on Thursday when the teams are announced. Perhaps Skelton isn't even fit to play, or maybe he's only fit enough for the bench. Rob Valentini gave a press conference where he said he's fit to start this weekend. So I would have thought he was maybe had a few minutes in, because they could have really done with his ball carrying as well. Jonathan, Luke mentioned Tadhg Beirne. I just want to read you some Tadhg Beirne quotes here, because I thought this was really interesting. It really was he's painting a picture very reminiscent of Joe Schmidt to Rob Kearney before the game in Chicago in 2016, kind of, I'm picking you, but I need you to deliver. So this is what he said about Andy Farrell. Tadhg Beirne said, I felt the pressure, I'm not going to lie. There are some things that you can't shy away from. A lot of people calling for your head out there. I know my performances to date weren't up to par by my standards. Faz has put a lot of trust in me, and it was an honour to be selected. I had to put in that performance. He had a quiet word with the back row. He said a few things to us. He put a little bit of pressure on us without putting too much pressure on us, as Andy does. But it gives you motivation, and it gives you a little bit of a realisation as to where his head's at and the opportunity that's been presented to us. Those words certainly sat with me for the 24 hours leading up to the game. I knew how important this game was. It really illustrates, Jonathan, I suppose, himself and Tom Curry, they got like a little bit of a special motivational treatment, and it worked an absolute treat, because both of those guys did have big question marks. Like, I don't think my skepticism, to be fair, was completely ill-founded. Like, Tadhg Beirne refers to it himself, like he hadn't been playing great. Tom Curry hadn't been playing great, but they're the classic kind of, test match animals that Ian McKeegan refers to. They just really brought it, and I just really enjoyed those quotes when I read them, because I can picture Andy Farrell having that little quiet word, maybe nothing too much even, but it really stoked the flames just right, because they were both brilliant.
Especially whenever Tadhg Beirne's talking about needing to go out and make an impact, and then he has his first turnover after like 25 seconds into the match. Like I thought both Beirne and Curry were probably the two best players on the pitch, as part of an immense effort over the first 50 minutes, really, by that Lions pack. The thing with Beirne, I think, at the end of what has been a very long season for him, was whether he had the engine to play 6. So I don't want to say emergence of McCarthy on this tour, but the form that McCarthy showed on this tour probably vaulted him into the starting lineup when an awful lot of people wouldn't have had him in the starting lineup whenever the tour began. And then you're in that position of, does Tadhg Beirne play 6 or does Tadhg Beirne not play? And I think a lot of people thought, and we had this debate like a couple of weeks ago, does he have the engine to play 6 at this stage of his career? And again, it's probably a reminder that you can't judge things on a couple of weeks, and you have to look at the body of work as going back slightly longer than that, because again, he showed all the Tadhg Beirne attributes that we've been watching for the last couple of years. It was a really, really strong performance from him, and he also, because again, we've debated this throughout the tour, the balance of the back row looked perfect. And it was something that I didn't really think they were going to be able to do, because I didn't think they'd actually brought the right balance of players on tour. And then you get to the first test, which is, let's be honest, when things really count. And they worked together brilliantly, the three of them in that back row trio. Like,
you're so right. Like Andy Farrell, to be fair, like he's a very good selector. Like, you know, I'd say almost all the time. Now, there's obviously sometimes we quibble with things and criticise various things, but he does have a good feel for that part of the game. And you're so right about the back row balance. Probably the biggest talking point I'd say we had in the kind of the pre-test series games about how it would all slot together. Luke, what did you make of it in that regard? You know, Beirne, Curry, Conan. Like Conan was asked to kind of, I suppose, do some really kind of punishing carries, kind of earn out some hard yards, and the two lads were just brilliant. Like, how did you find, after all the debate, I suppose, about back row balance, that the 6, 7, and 8 kind of dovetailed with each other on Saturday?
Yeah, like I thought they dovetailed very well defensively, and I thought, as you said, I thought Conan put in a really, really nice shift. He was very accurate for the whole game, and he took some collisions on head on, and didn't really kind of bowl, like skittle people and make big breaks and things like that. But I thought he was really effective, really tidy. He looked like he looked like the starting Test match 8. And then you saw kind of Earl come on. I thought Earl had a few nice moments. Like, he's got that power and that pace. Probably nice to be able to have him there when the kind of game opens up a little bit. So yeah, like the one thing I would wonder is, like, sorry, I suppose you can wonder all you want, but that front row is probably the difference maker, you know, because you've got Genge, you know, you've got Chien, and they're kind of like back rowers, that power. They can kind of bust a tackle or two. They can sidestep. They can pass the ball. You've obviously got Furlong as well, brilliant passer of the ball. So they kind of open up the pitch. They're almost like 3 back rowers themselves. And where I felt the guys were very effective as a unit was defensively, you know, and then obviously at scrum time as well, possibly the extra weight, even though I didn't think they did great at scrum time. But I think maybe, you know, with if Skelton comes back in, it might be very important to have someone like Beirne at 6. So, yeah, no, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Like, I didn't like, I don't think you're going to get that kind of, like something like you get with, say, like a Baird or someone like that. And you're not going to get that power game, that kind of, you know, that top of the ground type game with Beirne. But what you are going to get is that absolute nuisance at the breakdown and that tackling. Like, you know, he gets through some amount of tackles, guys. Like, and his work at the ruck, he's some real honest work at the ruck as well. It's not just kind of Curry too, but and actually Conan, I thought as well. Like, they were just kind of a bit of a nuisance there. They were hitting guys back. They were making it messy for Australia. They were, you know, it was taking an extra half a second to get out of there. So it was on the defensive side of the end that I kind of really saw them, and I thought they were really, really effective. And to be honest with you, that can be effective for your attack too. If you think about turnover ball, etc., there was a few nice kicks from turnover balls, etc. You know, so they kind of pinned the Aussies back on a few occasions with that. So while it's defensive, it can have an attacking tilt to it. But yeah, it's probably lacking the edge in attack, but I think defensively brilliant. And I think really, if you think about the start of the match, I think probably the first 45, 50 minutes, to me, the real tone was set defensively anyway. And I think it's offset. What you don't get in attack with that back three, with that back row, you probably make up for with the front row. So it balances out nicely.
Yeah, and to be fair, Curry did have one attacking intervention when he read the line out, picked the ball off one-handed, and then got an offload away to Finn Russell, and it ended up with Dan Chien scoring probably the decisive try.
He actually put him away in the corner as well with a lovely pass. It was his.
Yeah.
It was him. Yeah.
So that's great engine as well to start the move and then be able to come back up again and finish it. It was a real blue scrum cap performance by Tadhg Beirne. Like, every time I looked down, the blue scrum cap was just like wriggling out of a maul or like jumping at a line out, or, you know, the first breakdown, the referee's arm goes up, and then it's the blue scrum cap that emerges with the ball and the spoils. Jonathan, so what do we make then of the last, say, 30 minutes? Because it's funny, people who might be listening to this show and then who listen to us after the match on Saturday might think I've had like a personality transplant, because we were actually all quite downbeat, and maybe that was a symptom because we did the watch along and we had gone minute by minute, so all the mistakes were quite fixated in our head, but we were kind of really focusing on how the game ended. And like, the last 30 minutes was very scrappy from the Lions, and the bench didn't add a whole pile of impact, and we were a little bit disappointed the Lions didn't kick on and maybe emphatically put Australia to the sword. In your head, is it a case of it was kind of job done, 20-point margin, does it really matter how the game was finished out, or would you have concerns of the overall form of the team heading into Test 2 potentially, and maybe the first 45 minutes was not a mirage because they were quite dominant, but Australia made so many mistakes that maybe when they buttoned up their own game, that's what caused the Lions to look a little worse. Where's your head at about that last half an hour?
Yeah, I think it was just they had got a read of what Australia were capable of. I didn't think that they felt that Australia were capable of coming back into the game, and I think that took all the juice out of things. It's disappointing from a personal perspective for those players on the bench, because realistically, the one real point of difference that the Lions should have over everybody that they're playing is depth, because it's 4 different teams drawn into one. So the bench should be where they can really press home an advantage, because they should have so many talented players there. And we didn't really see that. And it's not the first time that we haven't seen that either on this tour, where things have lagged a little bit when the bench comes on. I don't quite know what that's down to on the whole, but I just got the sense watching it, and I think it must be very hard as a player to not get that sense as well, that the game was in hand. There was, and I think we saw a level drop. Obviously, there was something of a jolt when Australia got that first try out of nothing. But even then, with the Lions having had the try themselves disallowed, so what felt like it should have been probably a 21-0 lead was 14-5. It still didn't really feel like a live game, because you just never got the impression that Australia had the tools to get back into it. I don't think they had the attack to really make an impact on a test match of that level. And I think that really permeated through the whole last half hour of the test match, because it did feel particularly dead. Like, even, I think we've even seen in the reaction to the test match afterwards, like, I can't really remember a more muted reaction to a Lions test win.
2021, to be fair, the first test in 2021, maybe because there was no fans and it was COVID, I don't think people were jumping for joy or having real meaty debriefs either. But maybe I'm misremembering it.
Yeah, but I think there was still respect for the magnitude of beating South Africa, whereas here I think we're sort of back into the debates that we really thought that 12 months we were going to be having now, but then Australia's November maybe made people a little bit more optimistic about the Test series. But I think it was it felt essentially like par, and I don't think there was anything really to get that excited about. And I really feel that beyond the first 45 minutes they were so much better that the last period of the game was almost can almost be disregarded, really.
Yeah, it's funny because, like, say if this was an Ireland series and Ireland had won the game in the exact same manner, we probably would come on today and we wouldn't be talking as positively. Maybe it's because the magnitude of winning a Test series is so important that you maybe put extra weight in that element of it, because the overall performance across 80 minutes, like the last 30 minutes wasn't great. Like, Luke, how do you read that last 30 minutes? Like, do you agree with Jonathan, or yeah, like, were you disappointed with how the game fizzled out, or were you just kind of thinking, the game was over after the Chien try, it's on to Test 2? What was your kind of thoughts?
Yeah, like I thought, like that's kind of when I saw more of some of the sloppy stuff coming through. Like, there was one that kind of stood out to me, was the Freeman tried this offload behind the back, and I was kind of going like, that's madness. Like, let's just keep going, keep the pressure on them, break this team down, and that was kind of a function of maybe them being so far ahead. He thought he could kind of try that, and I always think that's a way of giving a team a little bit of life. And I thought Australia, I mentioned earlier on, like, they had some kind of fairly good chance. They got a little bit unlucky with a bouncing ball from a kick through on the left hand side. I can't remember who it's the blondie haired guy. I can't remember his
Harry
name.
Potter.
Was it Harry Potter? I don't know if it was Harry Potter, actually. I don't think it was him. It was a guy. It was one of the subs, I think.
Bit of magic.
The ball just bounced out, like very unlucky close to the line. I thought that could have been a try. Obviously, the disallowed try as well. Like, they were kind of crucial moments at the time where the game could have got sweaty. But my feeling is probably similar to you guys. It didn't really feel like that. I'm sure the Lions felt that way too. And I thought some of that leaked into their game. And as well, when you make a lot of changes like that, that can kind of happen. The game can come a little bit disjointed, and I thought that kind of played to a team that was kind of fighting back and trying to gain a bit of respect. Just from a mental standpoint, it was probably easier to be in Australia's shoes at that point. Yeah, and that's probably my lasting impression from it. It was a little bit disappointing, but I thought they were pretty impressive. I thought it was a good performance overall. I thought the job was done. Could it have been a bit tighter? Yeah, could have been tighter. But I think that's us being a little bit picky, maybe, you know.
Yeah, like the Chien try, it was done after the Chien try. 24-5, that game was over. And at half time, it was lucky it was only 17-5. Like it could, like, you know, as you said, the cross kick. Hugh Jones should have either given that ball inside the Gibson Park.
That was very bad.
That was very, very greedy, and also there's not good game awareness because, like, say Genge in the previous for the first try, he could have easily tried to like extend himself or like reach out or try to go over the line, but he had the wherewithal to, after picking up that bouncing ball and making yardage, to recycle it. He didn't go for broke like Jones did when he was clearly held. And
I didn't think it was a good sign. I actually I didn't really like that. I know that's really, maybe I'm being really, really harsh, but you could clearly see that it was like he was. You can feel when you're tackled. Do you know that kind of way? Like I thought it was either either quite stupid or quite selfish. It's like one or the other, you know.
I agree.
To not release the ball or to not look for. I don't know. I think it was Gibson Park was on his inside.
He was. Gibson Park was to his right.
It was a tricky pass to get it to him, but he never looked for him at all, you know. And I thought that was bad play, actually. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, look, I think he'd probably stick with the same team. They were very, very impressive. But I wonder, like, I thought Gary was in a really good position. I know Hugh Jones got a lot of tries, but Gary was brilliant against the Brumbies. I mean, that was a lovely bit of play for his try, the dummy and the kick through from Smith, and the great finish by Gary. He was in a good position, I think, to maybe. Thought that was going to be a closer call between those two. It seemed like it was clear cut at the end because of all the tries that Jones got, but I just didn't like that. I thought that was bad play.
Yeah, and I think it does open the door. We'll talk a bit about selection. I just want to ask you one more question. Like, Ringrose played an hour today against First Nations Pacifica, and was okay. Wasn't as good as against the Brumbies, but it wasn't the same team he was playing.
Trickier game though.
Yeah, trickier game. But look, before we get into next week, I just want to ask you about the back three. The one area I thought was just a little sloppy. Like you mentioned, Freeman, he had a couple of errors. He kicked around in the full as well. Keenan got robbed in the air for the first try, missed a tackle coming towards the end for another try. Still seems like he's scratching around for his form. Lowe, again, was quite mixed. He had that big fan on Jorgensen in the build-up to the Jones chance, but he also kind of had a few other errors. Like, he went for the line when there was guys outside him in the first half as well, and I feel like he actually hasn't had a good tour, and has probably been very lucky that Van der Merwe almost played his way out on the opening night in Dublin, because I think he's had some good moments, but he's had some very mixed moments as well. The back three generally, like, how did you assess all their performances?
Yeah, I thought Keenan was quite tidy for the first portion of the game, but as you say, didn't finish it great, and a few uncharacteristic errors. I thought, I thought a couple of weeks ago, like when he was under the pump and he had to play well, I thought he got a little bit lucky with Kinghorn, getting a knock. But I thought he also had a super solid game. Can't remember who it was against now, but
it was the Australia-New Zealand selection.
Yeah, I think he hit a really, really good night, and I think that's kind of what I've like the last year or so. That's been his differentiator. I do think I've heard a few rumblings that sickness was actually quite bad. I think he was in bad shape from that. So I'm not sure we got the full story on how kind of debilitating that was, or how much it impacted.
But he gave an interview where he said he could barely get off the toilet, so it was actually fairly graphic, and he did explain it a bit. So I think he lost like a fair few kilos. But yeah, sorry to cut across you.
And he doesn't look like a guy who's carrying too many extra kilos as well. So like I think he's probably dealing with a bit of that as well. So look, I think he's probably done enough to earn another shot. I thought he had some of his passing was lovely. The pass to Lowe was beautifully timed for the one where he kind of gives him a pure one-on-one, with even a little bit of an edge to give that handoff before the Hugh Jones disallowed try. Just watch any young player. I just think there was a beautiful skill, straightened it lovely, didn't try and take too much out of it, but stuck the guy in front of him just enough that it gives another player, like an international player, just a pure one-on-one, and you can kind of see the magic that can happen from that. It's a really tidy bit of skill. So look, he had some good moments for me, and he was super solid. And I think he gets another chance, even though he'll be disappointed. Like the one where he gets robbed out of his hand for the try. Bit of a freak try, wasn't it? Like I think you'd expect him to do better, but I'd also expect some of the guys running back to also do a little bit better. Like it shouldn't be a clear run in from that situation, guys. Like it shouldn't be. He shouldn't get home from there. There should be someone coming in behind to cover that in case he dropped it. So it's bad that he didn't win it. It was unusual that it was so clean, but they still should. The Lions as a team should have mopped that one up for me, because like you could easily lose that ball, guys.
What about Freeman and Lowe then?
Yeah, Freeman was okay. He had some good moments. But I really hated that offload. I got, when you're kind of watching the game, you're like, that pissed me off. I was like, come on, like foot on the throat. Let's finish them off here. That felt like a really loose bit of play. And I
A
thought
couple of
Lowe had a
really
few of those
bad kicks
moments.
as well. Like,
Yeah, he had one out in the full, in the first half.
Like you'd wonder would Kinghorn be a nice option there, but I don't think they will. I think that's
Mac Hansen as well if he's fit.
He's back available. Yeah,
no, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I think they really like Freeman, and he's been in good form. But prior to the tour. But yeah, I haven't been unbelievably impressed with him. Like I thought it's funny how he seems to have he's one of those guys I think who came in with really good momentum to the tour. And I just feel like the English commentators either don't know or are just like completely ignoring some of the those defensive lapses at the start of the tour. The one against Argentina was like unforgivable, like really, really bad stuff. So they basically haven't mentioned them. They've just decided they're not going to do that. And he didn't have a great night in the air as well in Dublin. So I feel like maybe he's one of those guys who's maybe been a little bit lucky. I don't think people are watching him as closely because they felt like he was a bit of a cert. And I think Lowe's probably in that bucket as well. But just like he is a good bit better than Van der Merwe guys. Like Van der Merwe was an absolute liability defensively and in the air. Like you can't I just would never pick him in a big test match personally. I love he's obviously an unbelievable finisher, brilliant athlete, great top end pace, and he's a huge man. But he's a dodgy defender, and he's dodgy in the air, and his positional sense as well. Like he's not in the same league as Lowe in that sense, for me personally anyway. And he doesn't have that ball playing ability that Farrell likes. So I don't think he was ever going to get selected. I don't think he will get selected. I think Lowe has to have a proper stinker for him to get in ahead of him.
Yeah.
Like Kinghorn is the interesting one, as is Mac Hansen. Like because those guys can slot in pretty much across the board, like pretty much in any of those positions, I think. With Lowe probably having the advantage being the left footer on the left-hand side, but the other two positions, I think you could easily have the other two guys in there, and I don't think you're losing much. You're probably possibly gaining something in terms of form,
Yeah, well, let's turn our attention towards Test 2 then. So today the Lions played First Nations Pacific at 24-19 winners. Actually a really good game, like a proper contest. If all the warm-up games were like this, I feel like the talk around the tour wouldn't be half as downbeat, because this was a really good game. And a lot of the guys playing today for First Nations Pacifica actually popped up in other games. Like Charlie Gamble got man of the match in the Waratahs game. I think he was man of the match as well, or he was certainly the best Waratah. He's the open side flanker with the gigantic moustache. I hope we see him. Brilliant. Hope we see him in the Champions Cup before long, because I thought he was brilliant, and fair play to him for his performance today. And in terms of the importance of this test, this kind of warm up game, like Luke, you were talking about it last week. So I went back and I looked at Emerging Springboks 13 Lions 13 in 2009, and this is a paragraph from the match report. Chances were at a premium at Newlands because of the heavy rain and sodden pitch, and few of the Lions were able to stake a claim for inclusion in the second test. Luke Fitzgerald was a notable exception, proving sharp in attack and solid in defence.
There you go.
And
it's funny, it was a game where you had to not panic today for the Lions. There was the temptation always in a kind of trial match scenario is to just try that extra one. To do a Hugh Jones on it, where you kind of go for that extra little bit of glory to try and get in the test match team. And I always remember that was always the advice I got from people who I really trust in those kind of trial matches, is like just play your game. When a chance comes to shine, it'll be obvious and it'll just come naturally. Don't force yourself to do that. So, have a good defensive game. Be solid. Don't drop any ball. Run hard. Ruck hard. Just work hard generally. And I think they're always big pillars of a game that if you do those things well, generally good opportunities will kind of present themselves here and there, and you'll kind of be in the right positions, in the right frame of mind to capitalize on them. So, I think that was kind of a few of the guys today. Like I felt like maybe because of the way the team played, there was a difference between say 2009 and the way that the team played, particularly in the positions I was competing for. There was a difference in how those guys played in the first test versus how the guys played, on the weekend. Like they won it, and that's the big difference. So it'll be probably a little bit harder for the coach to get his head around like why he might make some changes. And they were very dominant at the start of the game. So it'll be interesting to see if he does tinker with the team a little bit in that selection. My sense that he probably won't go too far away from that. I felt like he wanted to start this team from quite a bit out. Any thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah, Jonathan, do you want to come in on that? Like, obviously, anyone, I suppose, in terms of putting doubt in Andy Farrell's mind today, did you think like it was kind of I don't think that many guys put their hands up today.
No, not at all. The big ones, obviously, as we touched on earlier,
Yeah.
whether Hansen's fit. If Hansen's fit, then I see him coming in. From today, like Scott Cummings had another really good game. He started the tour in such a bad fashion that I think we almost all wrote him off after 2 games. But I wonder, does his performance mean that if McCarthy's out, that we're more likely to see Chesham go into the second row and Cummings come onto the bench just in a straight swap rather than do something more creative to get, another of those back row options onto the bench maybe? And the Marcus Smith HIA, given that happened on Tuesday and we're talking about a game on Saturday, also has huge implications as well, because he's on the bench as your 10 cover, but also your back 3 cover. If Owen Farrell's on the bench, then he's on the bench as your 10 and 12 cover. So where does that leave Bundy Aki? Does that mean that you have to get somebody who can cover the back 3 into that 23 jersey? For me, for me it does, but we know that Andy Farrell isn't afraid of having an out-and-out centre in that 23 jersey. So I think that could be the interesting outcome from today's game.
Yeah, I just really don't see him dropping Bundy. Like we were chatting off air and you said maybe Kinghorn comes into the 23 jersey. I think he might come into the 15, but if he doesn't say the 23, I just don't see Andy Farrell dropping Bundy Aki. And I thought he played pretty well off the bench. I thought he was one of the few subs who actually put himself about and was reasonably impactful. And that direct...
he definitely did, but it's just,
yeah.
do you go into a test match?
What flexibility he has in the starting team, guys, doesn't it? Like for example, if he goes with Hansen, he can kind of be a bailout for him if he goes, say he brings Kinghorn in or he leaves him out. Hansen could kind of be a bit flexing. You kind of say, well, that would play to Bundy's strengths in terms of keeping him on the bench. But if he doesn't do that, if he goes for something that's kind of more up and down, I think Farrell then is probably your guy, doesn't he? He gives you the little bit of extra flexibility. Someone will argue Smith, but I'm not sure about that. I think Farrell, yeah, I'd love to see him in there. I think he's playing really well. He's a great decision maker. He's physical. He's a proven test match animal. Yeah, I'd like to see him in there, but it's funny. I think it'll come down to who he selects and in the 15 and how much flexibility that does give him. I think.
I think Owen Farrell does come in because, I didn't agree with him being picked based on the body of work he'd put forward, but now that he has been picked, he has looked sharp. I thought he played well today. Like the idea of calling him up surely had this in mind, that he might be that. Like you've seen all the footage. Like there was halftime before the game. He's really leading this team, or the team that played today certainly, and you've seen maybe some behind the scenes clips of him talking a fair bit as well. Like I think it's a no-brainer really to have him on the bench. Like Finn Smith hasn't really had a great tour, as you said. Jonathan Marcus Smith might not even be available. I think Farrell has shown enough in his cameos to warrant that place in the squad now that he has been called up, because bringing him in and then not using him at all despite him actually playing some good rugby that would be even more bizarre to me than picking him in the first place. Because, fair enough if you'd called him in and he hadn't really played that well, you'd be like, okay, it was maybe a gamble that didn't really pan out. But he actually has looked pretty sharp now that he's here. So I think you need to use him.
So with your selection, Will, say for the sake of argument, Keenan gets injured after 5 minutes. Well, what are you doing in that scenario?
Well, if Freeman is starting, I suppose he goes to full back, where he has played a little bit for Northampton. If I'd have Hansen in there as well, and then Hansen goes to full back in that scenario. And
then who goes under the wing in that scenario?
Yeah, so you really are doing a reshuffle then, aren't you?
Like
Hugh Jones. Or
Hugh Jones too.
Or Ringrose, if Ringrose is in the team. Yeah, no, that's a fair point. There would need to be a rejig. Yeah. No, it is interesting. There's different options there. So yeah, I can see why if Farrell plays, maybe Bundy doesn't, but I don't know. I feel like with Ireland, we've often seen benches. Yeah, we've often seen benches with that where that hasn't been covered really. So I don't think that precludes him from doing it and then reshuffling.
But I think Ringrose with Ireland, Ringrose gives him the option to do that because he can move Ringrose more comfortably into the back 3.
I think he comes into the starting team potentially, Ringrose.
Ooh, yeah.
I mean that then opens you up a bit more to have that extra versatility in your starting team to cover the fact that you get less versatility on your bench, I suppose. Yeah.
That's an interesting one. The other one that you raised, Jonathan, that I do think is interesting is Joe McCarthy. It appears that Joe McCarthy won't be available. So let's just operate on that just for argument's sake. Do you upset the apple cart of that back row we discussed and put Beirne into second row, and then you have a slot available for one of these other back rows? Now, none of them looked unbelievable today. Jack Morgan, potentially the pick of the bunch. He was the one withdrawn first, so maybe it indicates Andy Farrell maybe likes him the most. It's, you're trying to kind of read the leaves with some of these substitutions as well. Like, would you be tempted to do that, or would you rather, as you said, that like for like, Chesham into second row, Cummings to the bench, and just leave that back row as the unit? I actually think I'm leaning that way. Before, ordinarily I like to maybe get my best guys on the pitch. But I just like the way it looked at the weekend, and I'd actually be more tempted for maybe a slightly more conservative Chesham into second row and Cummings there. What are you thinking?
If you had said this to me before the first test, that this scenario was going to come to pass, I would have said absolutely burn into the second row and get yourself one of those other back rows into the team. That would have been the way I would have been leaning. But just with the way that the first test went, and with the way that the back row unit operated as a unit, in the way that, we've admitted that we didn't really think it was going to. We didn't see that during the warm-up games. I would be very wary of breaking up that trio now. And I think bringing Chesham into the second row, and as I say, Cummings has really sort of redeemed himself over the last sort of 2 weeks, 3 weeks of this tour after a terrible start. So I think off the back of that would be the way that I would go, even though, exactly like you say, it doesn't feel like you're getting your best players into your 23 at that stage, because it feels like you have the excess of quality back row players. But I think that would be the way that I would go.
Yeah, Luke, what do you reckon around that? Like, you had a back row today of Van der Fleer 7, Jack Morgan at 6, and Henry Pollock at number 8. None of whom were involved in the 23 at all, obviously, in the first test. The McCarthy, injury or potential injury frees up a spot or two, depending on how things go. Like, what would you do?
Yeah, do you know what? I feel like we're talking about a lot of changes for a team that I just don't. My sense that he won't tinker as much with it, but it's a winning team. Like, it's, I'd say he'd probably try and keep the momentum going. So obviously McCarthy, we think, is injured, so he's got to make a change there. So my sense is that he'll probably go like for like. I don't think he'll want to upset the apple cart too much. It's probably where I'm leaning, just because. Why would you? Like, yes, the Aussies will make some adjustments, but they were clearly the better team on the weekend. So it feels silly to me. It feels like it's overthinking it, overdoing it, to be kind of messing around and moving too many people around and changing guys in and out. And I think as well, that's the thing with the Kinghorn one, that maybe I would say I would think maybe a little bit differently to you on that. I think Keenan will probably stay in there. I thought he did a pretty good job, bar a couple of errors maybe at the end when he kind of maybe dropped off. But I think he'll stick pretty similar to what served him well. I think he's done that generally as well. Andy Farrell, he makes a change here or there possibly, but generally only when it's forced upon him, which the team is playing well. I think he's picked the guys he wanted to pick in the first test. My sense is he'll try and pick as many of those guys again, because they've done the business for him. And that's probably where I'm leaning, Will. I don't know if that's a very conservative view, and I know he can be he can be pretty aggressive sometimes with new talents and things like that. But I think generally, if there's no one new there, no one that he doesn't know, that he doesn't have like the Prendergast thing, I think is a very aggressive move. But I think there's no one on this tour that kind of fits that mold, if you like. They're all kind of known quantities. So I think he pretty much knew who he was going to start, I think, fairly early on. I think he's got there pretty quick, I think he won't change.
At the same time, Jonathan, though, there was a couple of guys, say Ringrose and Hansen, who, if they were fit for Test 1, Ringrose, it appeared, was definitely going to start, just judging by how the Brumbies team was picked. And then Bundy Aki and him were paired together, obviously, for that Brumbies game. So there seemed to be a sense that once Ringrose was out, it was the Scottish centres, their cohesion maybe won the day. If Ringrose is back fit as he is, he played today. I can't see him, to Luke's point, I don't see him bringing in Ringrose, bringing in Bundy Aki, and then maybe bringing in Mac Hansen, who he loves. He's a real Mac Hansen guy. Changing a winning team to that degree and bringing in 3 Irish players would just be politically a fairly risky move. But at the same time, there's a couple of guys who didn't play great on Saturday, so I don't know. Could you see Ringrose, Aki, Hansen, any of those guys in the starting team on Saturday?
I can definitely see Hansen if he's fit coming in. I think he would have started anyway. As you say, Andy Farrell loves him. I think he's name checked him twice on this tour when asked, what things have impressed him, and he's picked out something that Mac Hansen has done. Normally off the ball work rate, he's much more of a Andy Farrell type winger than Freeman is. He comes in off the wing an awful lot more. He goes looking for work an awful lot more. That's not necessarily a criticism of Freeman. It's just what Andy Farrell asks his wingers to do that Freeman's maybe not used to as much. So I can definitely see him coming in. With Ringrose, I don't know. I do think that feels like too much change. And then, the other changes we're talking about are essentially forced if we're assuming that McCarthy's out and Marcus Smith is out, and if there is a sort of subsequent rejig to the bench required if Marcus Smith is out, because you lose his versatility. So I think given that you may have to make two changes anyway, and the potential for a third in Hansen, I think that would all work against bringing Ringrose in, because if you bring Ringrose in, as we sort of talked about at length at other points in this tour, it does feel like if you're changing one centre, you're changing two as well, which then, to Luke's point, means that you end up with even more change to your winning team.
Yeah, that just seems like too much change. I agree. Hansen would be the one if he's fit I could see coming in. I could see there being Hansen and then the change in the second row, and that's probably it. If I had to guess, if someone was putting me on the spot. One thing I forgot to mention, Luke, when we were chatting Test 1, and I don't want to harp on referees too much, just want to get your opinion on a couple of the decisions. Like, the Lions, I thought, were quite fortunate with a couple of the decisions, like Tadhg Beirne not getting a yellow card. Not that it was a massive head contact, but very rare you see any head contacts without a yellow. I thought Tom Curry poleaxing Tom Lyon in the air was 100% a yellow card. He could have broken his ribs. He could have badly injured him. The idea that that's not getting a yellow. And I just thought that the disallowed try for Su'a Ali, it should be disallowed, but Ben Earl did not wrap his arms in any replay I saw. He just went head down and flipped him over. And it was cleared, but we never got a real good replay of it. I actually did think if I was Joe Schmidt, I would be like, look, we were well beaten in the first hour, but at the same time, a couple of yellow cards there, we know that can be crucial. And I just thought there were three decisions that I thought went against Australia that ordinarily you do see them given.
Yeah, to the home side especially.
Yeah.
You get one of them at least. Yeah, I thought the Curry one was a clear one, because I suppose the point they made, and I think which probably saved him, was that it was a perfectly executed tackle. Like, it wasn't a dirty tackle. It was in the right space. Like, he didn't hit his legs out from underneath him or whatever. But
it was a rib breaker in the air.
No, he still hit him in the air, and he hit him hard. So those two factors alone, I think it was probably a yellow for me as well. So I agree with you on that one. The furlong one, I probably agree too, to be honest. I do think it's unusual that you don't see it particularly in the big matches, But yeah, I don't know. I thought that was kind of, it's going to sound weird, I thought that was less clear than the Curry one. The Curry one for me was definitely, I was like, he's in the air. Like, you just can't do that. Regardless of, you're almost kind of refereeing the outcome and because it's not a dirty tackle, as well as being illegal because he's in the air, he kind of got the benefit of the doubt, which I thought was probably wrong. So, I think there's fairly obvious gripe on that one. I think the Ben Earl one probably would have felt harsh. I don't see them pinging guys for that often. Well, I see that quite often around the try line. People doing those kind of stuff, those things. I agree.
I just hate that when you see it. It's just such a bad. It's real dangerous. Yeah.
Will, my views on that. I absolutely hate that stuff when people are kind of close to the line, and it just seems like the referee, like all the normal rules, seem to go out the window when you're defending against a try scoring opportunity. It's bizarre. So yeah, I always find that frustrating. But yeah, no, I think they can feel. Yeah, a little bit aggrieved. I think the manner of the first 45, 50 minutes will mean that when he's complaining about it, he's always going to have to caveat and say, well, we still might not know. But it could have changed the complexion of the game. And games can change quickly. I talked about a few of those opportunities. If they go the other way, maybe if they get one of those tries, they have a yellow card that kind of compounds it. You kind of go, oh, the Lions go into panic mode. And yeah, you can start going backwards. So yeah.
But especially the Curry one, which was the one that to me required the double take of, oh, he's not giving a yellow card for that. You were looking back at the screen, being like, right, okay. But it's 17-5 at that stage, so yeah. Especially because it's in Australia. It should have been a yellow card no matter where it's played. But the idea that all those decisions would go against the hometown team is quite funny. And the camera cut to Schmidt after the Curry one, and he was definitely like, you didn't need to be a lip reader to be like, that's an effing yellow, basically, was what he was saying. Jonathan, a real wild card this weekend is the referee, though, Andrea Piardi. I'm actually astounded that he has been given a Lions test. And again, look, I was going to say I don't want to pick on a referee, but I am picking on a referee, so it would sound quite trite to kind of criticise it. But
like he's been at the centre of some very contentious moments over the last season. He is not of the required standard for a huge test match, in my opinion. Like I'd say both coaches are in the ref's ear, or whatever the channels they can go through this week, to kind of put some pictures in front of him, because I feel like he's a bit of a bit of a lottery when he's refereeing, and a lot of kind of things tend to happen in his games. I think he could be a real key person this weekend.
The coaches meet them, guys. The coaching staffs meet the referee the week of.
Yeah, so Joe Schmidt probably went for a 10-course meal because he wanted to get all his ideas across and like have a good bit of time with them.
Yeah, no, they do.
I would say the interpretation of the breakdown, especially because you mentioned a lottery, but like the way that both teams really will be set up to try and attack the breakdown and try, in Australia's case, redress the imbalance at the breakdown. It's going to be such a huge part of this game, and I think you saw how slow Australia's ball was and how impacted they were by that slow ball. But if you have a referee like Piardi who isn't as consistent at the breakdown, and how that impacts, players like Curry, players like Beirne, who we said were the most impressive performers for the Lions, I think that's a huge element of the game this weekend and a huge variable of the game this weekend due to the different referee.
Yeah, and Nika Mushakeli is doing the third test too. Was refereeing today, who I actually think is a very good referee, one of the better referees. But yeah, I as soon as it was announced, I was like, "Oh, that second test, which will be the key one, 90,000 people at MCG. This could get interesting on Saturday." Okay, so like, Luke, if we see a team sheet on Thursday and it's Skelton is back and Valentini is back and and maybe Angus Bell starting for Australia, so they have a beefier pack, and if the team selection goes broadly how we think from a Lions perspective, would say maybe Cheslaman and maybe Mac Hansen, but then broadly the same. How are you looking at Saturday? Do you think the Lions dominant, they get the job done, it should be kind of relatively straightforward, or do you think those new additions to Australia are good enough to make this a real contest and possibly even snatch a win?
I think maybe the second option. I think they get better this week. I think they haven't played enough rugby together. And I think those guys are brilliant players and do make it. Like Skelton kind of changes the complexion of everything, because I kind of feel like he's a guaranteed gain line. And he's a bit of a nightmare at the ruck and the mauls. He makes a big difference at mauls and scrum. So like the Aussies did pretty well at the scrum, I thought. So part of me thinks that, adding him in is hardly gonna be a negative there. So yeah, no, I think him alone, I think, and if they can get some go forward with those other players, if they can make an impact, yeah, then I'd probably be leaning towards Australia making more inroads. I think maybe a tighter game. My feeling is that I don't think they've got the belief to go and beat the Lions. Is where maybe I'm being really harsh, but I think they'll get better. I think that those guys will help them in terms of, like, they'll have better resources. But I still think there's a difference between what the Lions have and what they have. And I think in the key positions, particularly 9 and 10, and the front row, I think there's a big difference between both teams. Well, and that's probably the two areas where I really see. And even on the bench, what the Lions have, particularly in the front row, you're kind of going, well, like, there's some really snazzy players there. So they're the two areas that are kind of the key bits for me. And I think they'll be the telling factors in who wins the test matches. But the other guys definitely make it tighter. And Australia will be better. I think Joe Schmidt will have a good plan. And I think they won't lose. I said they didn't have belief, but I think Joe Schmidt is a guy who maybe is one of the only guys who could turn that around, showing you ways and places where they could have been better and where they possibly could have broken the Lions. And they might go into it with a bit more belief than maybe I'm giving them credit for, but feels like an uphill battle for them, particularly given what's going on with 9 and 10.
Yeah, Jonathan, I'm not sure what your view is on some of the things we discussed just there, but I read out the quote earlier from Tadhg Beirne about Andy Farrell having a quiet word with the back row. I think it's the bench he needs to have a quiet word with this weekend. Whoever he names, those 8 players, did not give them enough, and not only didn't give them enough, but probably actively undermined their ability to close it out. Whereas I think, as you said, that should be the most straightforward part of everything. They have 4 nations to pick from. They have a really deep squad. That should be like the part that's kind of nailed on. Didn't get it that weekend, so that's where I'm really looking for this weekend. I'd like to see a much better bench impact,
and I think they'll need it this weekend. I think to watch a test match at this level, and a test match that's essentially 12 years in the making for Australia, and feel like they're so devoid of one thing, was actually quite striking. Like, they missed ball carriers to an incredible degree in that game. And as Luke points out, they could have 3 big ball carriers coming back in to their test side this weekend, and I think that'll make a huge difference. Not to just entirely echo everything Luke said, but I do think that the 9 and 10 will still be a problem. But I think that those 3 guys, assuming that Angus Bell comes into the team as well, the starting team as well, will make a huge difference. So I think it will be an awful lot closer this weekend. And I also think that I would be very surprised if Joe Schmidt doesn't come up with something, having played a team 1 week to be playing them the next. Probably got the Lions' best effort across that 45 minutes. And I think we saw enough of Joe Schmidt in whenever he was here to know that he's not just going to go in same again. I think he will have come up with something from watching that first test to be implemented into the second test. So I think it'll be closer, but I do think the Lions will still win.
Yeah, and I suppose just as we expect Australia to be better, I do expect the Lions to be better too, just because that was the first time that team played together. Like the team that played against the Brumbies with a few injuries, it wasn't the team that took the field on Saturday. So I do expect that bit of cohesion to help. But obviously very fascinated to see who's picked on Thursday. One last thing, Luke, today, I actually thought Jamie Osborne played very well. I'm not sure what you made of his performance. Obviously late call up. I think he was in a taxi in Portugal with some of the other Ireland players when Andy Farrell's name flashed up on his screen. So to be able to get the nod for the match starting alongside Owen Farrell, it's a pity the rejig happened so early, because I thought he was actually dovetailing really nicely with Owen Farrell. But I'm fascinated to see where he goes next season. Like Jordy Barrett's gone from Leinster. I know Ioane is in, but he might be on the wing. We don't know exactly where he might play. So this could be his real big year to maybe. I know Robbie Henshaw's still there, but Henshaw's I think 33 now, 32, 33. Big year upcoming for Osborne. I thought he had a really good game today.
Yeah, he's got to kick on, hasn't he? And it looks like, I think Ioane is probably more. I know he's played a lot of 13, but I feel like where he fits better for Leinster is probably on the wing, whereas Barrett clearly fitted better at 12. Like he was such a good player there that you were always going to pick him there. So, yeah, no, it's one of those ones. Like you can see he's kind of grown into the body. He's a big guy, he's strong. I don't think he's a winger personally. So I think that'll be a problem for him if they start putting Ioane in 13 or in 12. So. I'd like to see him in there. I really rate him. I think he's an excellent centre. He's a good fullback too. So I really do hope he kind of kicks on alongside kind of the likes of kind of Tommy O'Brien and that next year. So watching closely, like again, probably having the same concerns about Ioane that I had with Barrett, is like what young Irish guy is going to miss out in the Leinster team if he's fit and he kind of, if he delivers on what we know he's capable of in terms of Ioane, who loses out? Because going to be
Tommy O'Brien probably looking at it saying, I'm the breakout player of the year, and I know I'm after.
No way you can't drop Tommy O'Brien.
That's what I'm saying. If you're looking where he fits in, like Gary Ringrose is at 13, where Ioane plays off, and he's played in the wing a fair bit. You have James Lowe and one of the best young players in the country. So yeah, I agree with you.
Tricky. Yeah.
So we'll have to wait and see there. But yeah, great day for Jamie Osborne, grabbing 2 tries. Hopefully there's a nice try bonus to go with that big Lions trophy all the guys are getting this year.
Don't do that in rugby. That's for the soccer lads.
Yeah. Well, Luke, Jonathan, thanks so much for joining me. We will reconvene next week to review test number 2. Either the Lions will have sealed a first series win since 2013, or there will be all to play for looking ahead to Sydney in test 3. Until then, thanks so much for joining me, and goodbye.